Hello, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Oh man. That wasn't right. That one was like. So the topic today is about humility, and hold on a sec. Humility actually is a gateway to higher dimensions. So I wanted to just kind of open it up a little bit. When we hear the word humility, it's not a word that gets thrown around as much. It doesn't really make you a lot of money. It doesn't really get you ahead in this world. But it's a beautiful quality once cultivated. But let's maybe throw some ideas around. What do we think of when we think of humility or a humble person?
Jesus.
Who said Jesus? Very good. I agree.
We are in America.
Very good.
No ego.
What did Jesus say about humility?
It's good.
It's good. Very good. What else?
The loss of ego.
Loss of ego. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Stepping more into the spiritual nature as opposed to the human, animalistic nature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Admitting when you're wrong.
Admitting when you're wrong.
Going the extra mile.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
When I think of humility, I think of generosity.
Generosity. Okay.
Which takes no
Not
ego.
taking offense.
Sorry.
Which takes no ego.
Which takes no ego. So selflessly giving oneself. Okay. What else?
Not taking offense.
Not taking offense. Why is it? Why? What do you mean by that in reference to humility?
You have to be really attached to ego to be offended by things that people do.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think the ego is?
Attachment to the idea that you're really important
Okay.
and that you deserve some type of, I don't know, special treatment.
Honor.
Yeah, that's it.
I really. Oh, go ahead. No. Go ahead.
Someone who's not looking for adoration or distinction.
Adoration, distinction. So kind of what he was saying with honor, thinking that you deserve honor.
Admitting that there's always more to learn and you don't know everything.
Okay. And why is that important?
Well, if you feel like you know everything, then there's no point of growth. There's no growth.
Mm.
You're just stuck in one spot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh.
So I would say that a good example of humility is seeing the world and others and that above you, maybe the divine,
Mm-hmm.
is more important than us. Like having a less important view of ourselves in the whole grand scheme of things.
Mm. Very nice. Is humility, what are our thoughts? Because a lot of times when I think of humility personally, sometimes I can get mixed up with low self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
Real quick. So what are our thoughts on that?
If you're weak, you're humble, or being humble can make you look weak.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Who else? Okay.
Well, I think they're two different things, so that they shouldn't be collapsed, and that to have true humility actually takes lots of strength.
Mm.
Whereas if you have low self-esteem, you're actually being more quiet or more down, not because you have humility, but because you have low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And low self-esteem is when you feel bad about yourself. Humility is when you know that that this whole eternal events that happen are not that important. That what you do, how you treat people, is more important than how other people treat you.
Mm. All right. So I think we got some good working definitions. Some definitions that I found that I really liked. That actually you guys all really knocked out the park. is having one is so in Sanskrit, which is an ancient language that goes back about 5,000 or 6,000 years, and is really the basis of ancient yogic texts. So has anybody ever heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Okay, so a good amount of people. So that's really considered like a core yogic text. And in that text, the word for humility is a manitwam. A manitwam. So a manitwam. Can you guys say that? So a manitwam. And that's the word for humility in Sanskrit. And so a couple of definitions that I have found is having a truthful understanding of one's capabilities. So I think when you have a low self-esteem, it's that you have you actually decrease your abilities. So it's like you may be a really smart person, you say, I'm not smart at all. That's not actually humility. When I read this definition, it's, yeah, I may be intelligent, but that doesn't mean I'm the most intelligent person in the world, right? I can be complete, but that doesn't mean I can't become more complete. I can be a part of a team and have skill sets and things that really make me valuable as a part of that team, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other elements on that team that do strengthen and enhance, essentially, what I bring to the table. Kind of like if you think of a gold ring, right? And then you put a diamond on there. Do they complement each other?
Yeah.
Or do they take away from it, right? And so I really like that definition of humility because it creates space while simultaneously understanding your value relative to everybody else. Another definition that I found was the honor and dishonor thing. So I felt like that hit it right on the head. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. That one's tough. All right? Who doesn't want to be good at their job and hear that they did an amazing job?
I think it's because, like, naturally we seek approval,
Yeah.
so that's probably why.
Yeah, no, exactly. We seek approval. I mean, sometimes our paychecks depend on it, right? I mean, we depend on our boss saying, hey, you did a good job, and because if you're doing a good job, then what?
Keep your job.
You keep your job. And so, not having honor is, that's a tough one. And then there was one other one. Actually, those were the two. I'm changing directions here. So we had two. So what was the first one? Anybody remember? Realizing your capabilities. And what else?
Not seeking honor.
Not seeking honor. And so I thought about this in relation to my own life. And actually, I got married maybe about a year ago. My wife is right here. Say hello to her. And I feel like in a relationship, particularly marriage, I mean, people say like, oh, there's no difference being married than in a serious relationship. I mean, everybody's different, but I don't know. Marriage seems way more intense than being in just a serious, committed relationship. And you learn real quick that there's a such thing as battles, and then there's wars. And sometimes to win those, and war may sound really like harsh, like, oh my God, what is going on? And Bruce and Rodney and Sophie's relationship, a war. But I mean, that's really just kind of an analogy to if you focus so much on the small stuff, then the bigger stuff that actually does need work and massaging, kind of gets thrown on the back burner because you're so busy arguing about, you said you were going to throw out the trash, what? And just that whole thing. Why didn't you clean the toilet? Put the toilet seat down. Not that I ever do any of those things, of course. Always put the toilet seat down. But, you know, a unique challenge that we really had to explore was we're from vastly different cultures. So my wife's German, I'm American, African American, and being an American and from, I guess, black culture is almost kind of two separate cultures that have to integrate, and then you kind of add Germanness into the mix, and now you got three different things just kind of all working together. And of course, you know, trying to move forward in the progression of dating and then getting married, I went to Germany as a part of that courting process to get married. And that's where it really hits you in the face. It's like, oh man, like, there's a big difference in culture here. And one tiny little thing, not so much a big thing, but it was a tiny thing, is that in Germany, they eat a lot of bread. And they take a really, really long time to eat. It's funny now, but when you're sitting there and you're like 45 minutes in, because I mean, this is America, right? It's like you eat, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe I come from like an uncultured family. They're a little bit more, you know, old worldly over there. But out here, it's like we're fast food nation, right? It's like if you go out on like a Friday night and spend 40 minutes together at a table, unless you got like 12 people there, that's, you know, and even then, it's like, where's the waitress? Why ain't they brought my check? You know, it's like a whole thing. But you got into Germany, I mean, and I just remember kind of the first day, I was like, is it Thanksgiving? Like, wow, like, what are we doing here? Because there's 6 of us sitting around. There's me and my wife arrive, and then there's 6 of us that are in the house, and very meticulously, they're getting prepared for the meal, and they pull out all the Brot, or Brotchen, the bread, and put it all on the table. And we're talking about like massive heaps of bread, right? And cheese, and jams, and butters, and Nutella, and so many things. All these wonderful things that you can put on bread. And you look around, and at that point, I was like 20 pounds heavier. So I'm a little confused, because I'm like, where are all these skinny people sitting around the table? Like, what happened to carbs being bad for you, right? But somehow or other, they're just, you know, they eat all this bread and they stay really skinny. But that's beside the point. You know, we're looking around the table, and, you know, we sit down, we eat. Literally 2 hours later, we're still sitting down, eating. And I'm like looking at my watch like, man, like, what's going on here? We started at 6, it's 8:30. And it's like, that's cool. We're getting used to each other, whatever. And then the next day, we spend an hour on breakfast. We go to a coffee shop. We spend an hour there just getting coffee. And then 2 hours on lunch, 2 hours at dinner. And I'm just like, you know, I'm starting to think that these people just go to work just so they have stuff to talk about when they're eating. like we eat more than we're doing anything else. Like, what's going on here? And it was actually kind of a little bit of a point of contention because, you know, in most cultures, you know, when you look at more old worldly cultures, food is actually a huge thing. I mean, even within, like, especially with, like, in ancient cultures and even, like, modern Middle Eastern cultures and so on, like, they come together really it's a value. It's not just like, oh, we're sitting here eating for a long time. It's like that's where the family unit talks about their day, you know, really comes together, explores different frustrations that they're having, argues, whatever's happening, that's when it comes together. And that was actually a huge point of contention with me and my wife because dinner would come around and she's like, we're not eating together? And I'm like, no. Like, I already ate. She's like, you can wait for me to come home? And I'm, oh, was I supposed to? Because when I go home for Thanksgiving, like if you put a table down before everybody else has gotten their food, they're literally eating before anybody else can sit down. And so we butted heads a little bit, and this all ties together, actually. I'm not just giving you a story about Germany. My frustration, no. Hint, hint, no. what I found was fascinating is obviously there's a certain way that I've walked into the world with this expectation that this is what lunch means or this is what dinner means, right? And there's a byproduct to that. I mean, we're a culture that doesn't really value so much relationships of the sense of deep personal connection and intimacy. In fact, I feel like the more American society is progressing with the advent of social media and so many things, our one-to-one relationships, according to studies and so many things, are becoming like not as potent. Whereas you go to a place like Germany, and Germany can be a little bit cold. It's not just weather, but like German people are kind of known for being really cold. But then you like walk into their homes, and there's like this immense amount of warmth that really circulates around the dinner table, and there's an enjoyment there. That the reason I bring that up is because at first go, when I'm sitting there looking at this essentially ritual, right? It's a ritual. Every day you go to eat. You do the whole thing, spend 20 minutes bringing out all the food, get out all the nicest plates, the whole thing. And you're sitting there, it's like, what's all this for? And initially when we're sitting there arguing about it, I was like, I don't get it. But what I ended up, as our relationship progressed more and more, the thing that I found really beneficial was not only that process of letting go a bit, but cultivating humility, where it's like to allow that experience to actually kind of take hold of my heart, in the sense of like, wow, like you can actually have, like this is actually something that with my own culture, we miss wholeheartedly. Like when I go home now for Thanksgiving or Christmas, it like fully disturbs me that like we don't spend more time like sitting down. It's like a whole pastime that as Americans, a lot of people really don't get, at least in urban areas. And so the way that I felt that really, I guess, translates into humility is you have two different cultures, right? And humility is really the essence of what we study here, which is called bhakti yoga. And so bhakti means connection with the divine in love or devotional service. And the essence of humility is really a byproduct of that love and the transformation that has to go through us to be able to engage in this relationship of vulnerability, of love, of just a higher magnitude. And without that humility, there's actually no way to be transformed, not just by kind of this greater essence, but also just the world around us for the most insignificant things, right? I mean, that was literally a point of contention about how to eat. Like, I'm missing the point. I don't get it. And my wife's like sitting there having to explain it to me, like going through, like walking through, and luckily, I listen and I'm not just like putting my foot down and stuff like that, but what concerns me is that like if I can miss a little beautiful gem like that, just of engaging in like this almost, 1,000-year pastime and all the wonderful benefits of just connecting with my wife, at the end of the day, and learning more about her and exploring that, or learning more about her family and taking the time to really connect in those relationships. I guess my question becomes, what else are we missing? Because we are full of pride and not humble. I think I sometimes get asked for advice, as I'm sure everybody does, right? Generally, everybody's been asked for advice at one point. Have you ever been asked for advice, and then the whole time you're telling them something, they're listening, they're nodding their head, but maybe you tell them one or two things that are outside of what they think would help them solve the problem. And what usually happens? Huh?
Defiance.
They get defiant. What do they say? Oh, that won't work. Right? How many people have heard that when they've been asked for advice? Right? Oh, that won't work. I always think that's super ironic, because if you knew what would work, then why are you asking me for advice? It's not like, oh, I've tried that. 100 different ways, it's like, oh, that won't work. That doesn't seem like it'll work. And so there's, again, going back to that humility point, that we walk through life and we do have a set of conditioning. Even when we think, oh, I don't have a worldview, I don't have a way that I'm just, I think that I'm just perfectly neutral. Everything's love. Whatever we think. Like, that's a particular way that we decide to walk through this world and call it life. And a lot of times we don't even recognize it because we're so immersed in our cultures and our societies and what we think is right, that you come and meet somebody maybe with a different worldview, with a different set of circumstances, where maybe they're seeing the world in a completely wonderful and beautiful way based on the way that they've been brought up or their culture. And the ticket to be able to be transformed into that other worldview is essentially humility. Because we actually have to say, maybe I don't know everything. A lot of times in this world, we think of all other, at least I'm a victim of that. Maybe you guys aren't as puffed up as me. But a lot of times when I learn something new, I think of everything as just an extension of what I already know. But there's actually no new ideas that actually exist out of something that I already know. Does that make sense? Like, that there can't be an independent idea that fundamentally exists, and I've never been able to touch that idea before inside of my experience. And as I'm growing older, I'm kind of like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I get completely wrong on a regular basis. And what a great way to live in the world, where you're actually walking into experiences, even when you know something and you can truly sit down and have a conversation where it's like you're not just trying to get honor for yourself and talk about yourself, but deeply listen to others. It's like as soon as you judge somebody, you can no longer help them. And so humility is just the foundation, not just for love, but just the essence of communication in general. And that's the price that we have to pay. It's like if you think of, like a jungle gym, right? It's like if you've got the bar behind you and you're in the jungle gym, it's like to move forward to the one in front of you, what do you got to do to the one behind you? You got to let go. So to actually be transformed by ideas in a really meaningful way, it actually takes some work. You got to understand your ego. That's been a big word that's been thrown around quite a bit. And specifically in Sanskrit, it's called ahankara, or false ego. So these identities that we cultivate within ourselves, that really are just disconnecting us from the world around us and creating an inability for us to deeply connect with others. And so how does this translate to higher consciousness? This is just kind of basic. Well, how do I connect with others? Ultimately, there's a famous text that a saint spoke. He spoke 8 verses. And one of the verses was Trinada pi sunichena, Torora pi sahishnuna mani namana deda kirtanaya sada hariha. That we should, try to find the truth, or essentially, when we say these names, these divine names, we should chant them in a humble state of mind, thinking ourselves lower than the straw in the street. We should become more tolerant than a tree. We should become devoid from all sense of false prestige and give up that sense of honor that's required. And in that, connect with transcendental, ecstatic happiness unconditionally. And so, who's into happiness?
Yeah.
All right? So what if you got a whole lot of happiness all the time? That's what these ancient, and not just 400 years ago, but literally for millennia, that's what the essence of this names were, is to, essentially unlock divine, rapturous, ecstatic, unconditional happiness within our hearts that's actually covered by that pride, that lust, that envy. And within us, we actually have all the happiness completely within us. And if we chant this mantra, that's what helps unlock that. But the ticket, just like if I want to connect with my wife or be any sort of business dealings or connect with my clients, the same way to connect with the divine or these divine names is ultimately to cultivate that humility while chanting these names as well. And in that way, we soften our hearts. We're able to essentially open ourselves, understand that we're not the center, that maybe some of the ways that we're looking at this world aren't necessarily as beneficial as we think. You know, a great example of that is, how are we conditioned in America? Our deep conditioning is that by engaging our senses in unlimited gratification, we become happy. So if I get the biggest car and the biggest house, with the most female or men, with the best job, I'm going to be happy. How's it working out for us?
People are miserable.
Doesn't seem to be working out so well. So I think it even takes humility to be able to acknowledge that point and say, Einstein said, if I do something over and over again and expect different results, that's actually the definition of insanity.
I wanted to share something because I read a passage this morning and it's super synchronistic because it's super relevant.
Sure, go ahead.
It's from the prophet,
Mm.
and it says, all you have shall someday be given. Therefore give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. You often say, I would give, but only to the deserving. The trees in your orchards say not so, nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. Surely he who is worthy to receive his days and his nights is worthy of all else from you. And he who has deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill his cup from your little stream. And what desert greater shall there be than that which lies in the courage and the confidence, nay, the charity of receiving? And who are you that men should rend their bosom and unveil their pride, that you may see their worth naked and their pride unabashed? See first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. Yeah. So, I think to sum it all up, and thank you again. That was really sweet. Thank you. You know, Marcus Aurelius, he's a great philosopher, and I want to say the last Roman emperor, actually. Rome was a pretty big empire, similar to America is now, and you know, they got very much in their egos, and then somehow it collapsed, but we're not, of course. You know, he said one thing that, he said a quote that, you know, it takes more courage to go into the essence of the self or to explore some of the darker corners of our soul. So it takes more courage to explore the dark corners of our soul than to fight 1,000 men in battle. And when I hear that quote, it automatically makes me think, yeah, it's hard to be humble. It's hard to accept that maybe we're not the center. It's hard to accept that maybe there's knowledge that's completely independent of what we already know, and maybe we might have to accept someone as a teacher to help us attain higher knowledge. That there's so much more going on that can be perceived by my minute intelligence. That there actually may be something that's fundamentally greater than my mind and intelligence. And I can only approach that through service and love, and take a truly unlimitedly humble position. And so I guess I would just implore you to think about, in addition to not only the accomplishments that you can obtain and so many things, but how can I listen? How can I deeply hear what other people are saying? And what are the assumptions that I'm making about my engagements? A lot of people say, oh, nobody knows the answers to life. Those can never be answered. You know what the assumption is there?
That there's not an answer.
No, it's deeper than that. It's because I don't know. Nobody knows. Or what's the other thing that we say? Oh, that's common sense. What's the assumption there? Because I know, everybody should know. Right? And so we walk through the world with us as the center of all knowledge that should exist or not exist based on what we know or don't know. And then we want mercy when somebody else says, oh, you should have known that. That's common sense. And then the cycle continues. And so we engage in this process to help us unlock that unlimited humility that then becomes essentially the doorway, the ticket. So how do I have a better relationship with my wife? I cultivate humility. How do I have a better relationship with people? I cultivate humility. How do I have a better relationship with the divine? Or cultivate a sense where I can ask deeper questions and find real answers by people who may know, and then maybe some people who don't know so much, but at least I'm in a humble position where I can differentiate the two. I also have humility. So with that humble heart, I implore you to try to chant these, open your heart, really focus, take some deep breaths, close your eyes, and see if it transforms you.